Hey everybody, welcome back to the LuckyDog podcast. This is your host, Elias Roush. This podcast is sponsored by EliasRoushMedia.com, photo, video, digital media production. Today we are discussing Mr. Robot's series finale feedback. We are covering everything we can possibly about Mr. Robot, trying to wrap up all the loose ends. If we miss anything, I'll probably have to go back in the description, but we're going to try to get just about everything we can all on the podcast. Some of y'all's feedback and a couple of the notes that I took going back and rewatching the part 1 and part 2 season finale. So this is complete spoilers for the entire series. By now, I expect you to have seen Mr. Robot, the show. So up top, I just wanted to remind everybody where you can find the Lucky Dog podcast. You can find us on Soundcloud. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn. You can even ask your Amazon Echo to download TuneIn, and you can play the Lucky Dog podcast anytime you want. Get the freshest, newest podcast you possibly can. So, this podcast is also available on Twitch and YouTube as well. So if you're laying in bed and have a Fire Stick TV, just throw it on YouTube or Twitch on there, and you'll be set to go. So we are on Mr. Robot now. So let's take a couple of the comments that we have from the YouTube. Jamie Luna says, "Fucking genius, best show of the decade." So based on that, I guess that Jamie hated the show. I'm just messing. Jamie seemed to have loved it, and I'm relatively right there with Jamie. I am slightly a little bit more pulled back from my initial reaction. I know some people were a little bit more polarized on the ending. Some people loved it. Some people weren't so crazy about it. They were like, "Where's the White Rose? Where's the Dark Army? Is there a time shiftiness going on? What exactly is going on?" Overall, we find out all that's going on in his head, and the time shiftiness is not actually happening. But I think that the fact that we didn't get too much of a solidified payoff on the White Rose front is going to irritate some people on this season finale. Simi says, spoilers. "When it was discovered that Elliot had multiple personality disorder, I remember this disorder usually happens when the individual went through intense trauma, especially those who experience sexual abuse. I didn't actually think that it was going to be the case. Damn, it's such a mind-blowing experience knowing the revelation after this episode." So, the revelation after the episode, obviously we're talking about that Mr. Robot Elliot, our Elliot, has taken over the real Elliot over some time in the last year, which I think we can have confirmation that we've been watching our Elliot has been in control the entire time of the television series, with the exception of maybe a few times the real Elliot has tried to seep in. When we got that initial reveal, I wasn't mind blown per se. So yeah, I wasn't really like mind blown by the revelation of finding out that our Elliot was not the real Elliot. I was more like, I felt like I was figuring out the missing clues to the crime or something like that, or finding out a faster direction to get somewhere because we had been going the long way the whole time. This feels like the proper explanation that would make sense for who this guy is. And going along back with the flashbacks at the beginning, a lot of the beginning stuff is Angela explaining that you aren't exactly who you said you've been. And it's a bunch of these flashbacks of people talking to Elliot saying, "You aren't the person I initially knew several months ago," which kind of explains why the Elliot we know is slightly different from the real Elliot. So I'm glad Simi had the mind-blowing experience. I was... I guess, like I said, I felt like I was expecting some sort of revelation like this. Not like I knew he was going to be another disorder. I was just like, there's something up with this guy, and we're just missing a piece. And this explains it. Raymond says, we'll always be a part of Elliot. And I think that that's something that is kind of left open to interpretation, as in, who are we as the audience? Because Krista definitely acknowledges us as viewers and as, voyeurs that have been looking, over Elliot, or, with Elliot during everything, but unable to interact. I'm not exactly sure what our complicity is in this. And there's also the possibility that we might be Elliot, which I don't necessarily believe. I feel like that's kind of, I don't know. I'd have to marinate on that a little bit just to think about. I don't think we're Elliot, but there's not 100%. There's nothing confirmed that we are or aren't. My only thing is I feel like we were in places that the real Elliot couldn't be. So, also the eye at the very end. When I initially watched the show, I thought the eye was tan, or sorry, not tan, a tan eye, kind of like a green or an olive color, and definitely not a blue. So when I went back and rewatched it, I actually had to rewind it twice. The eye that we pull out of definitely has kind of a mixed color to it. It's kind of a blue goldish color. So the way that it pulls out of the eye, it's leaves it up to interpretation of who you think that could be. I personally don't believe that it's Sam Esmail. I think that's it's kind of cheating. Just in a way that that character, if it was the writer and director of the show that we pulled out of the eye of, I don't know. I just feel like he'd be laughing at us if that's if that's what it was, because it's just like, obviously this idea and this story came from you, Sam Esmail, the director. I just don't need a physical representation of that happening, unless you're in the story, that is. JC says, this is very eerie and very uncanny to the season finale. But this guy seemed to have predicted the ending and parts to the twists with 80% accuracy. You'll see what I mean when you look at the date and artworks. Okay, so apparently someone had called the possibility of having Elliot of being another personality, which, okay, I do recall one or two people saying in the void, are these other figments of his personality? I don't remember anyone saying that Elliot himself is another personality. All right. Johnny Castle, your comments are just way long. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to scroll down to the bottom of it. Let me see. All right, Johnny Castle doesn't seem so hot on the way this ends, from what it looks like. You can't just let go of your inflicting traumas, especially through your childhood. Suffer through a plane crash and just decide that you're going to be normal again, and let go, quote unquote. You can't, quote unquote, let go of things that made you who you are. Leon made no sense in standing behind Elliot. He just served no purpose other than a limo driver with fourth wall breaking abilities. That's it. Well, I mean, Leon was there for protection, so I'm not really sure if I can agree with all of that. But I do feel like the Leon story was a little bit convenient to leave the Dark Army all of a sudden, considering how intense they were. And, in getting out of that, anybody that seemed to want to get out of the Dark Army, except for like Leon and Irving, seemed to have gotten popped. Tyrell dies before he gets saturated with the purple light and that loud, mysterious creature screaming. No closure to that. Well, Johnny, I would say that the creature screaming obviously is the howl of death, and that's just kind of like a metaphor. I would say the blue light, my guess is Tyrell has some sort of DID as well. I'm just going to go with that because he seemed to kind of, go all over the spectrum with his emotions. Sometimes he was excessively excited, and then other times he didn't want to be in the same room as the people that he loved. So I just I I do have a couple of gripes with the Tyrell character and Joanna Willett character. What was the exact importance of having those characters besides maybe infiltrating E Corp and having maybe Elliot have like a somewhat of a doppelganger that is more like a successful version of himself, maybe something in that way. Um, Johnny also says, "What was the White Rose massive hadron collider originally intended for before her suicide?" So this was another thing, the hadron collider or whatever, that I think they were trying to move to the Congo, which I do feel the Congo shit was kind of dropped. I don't feel like it was ever fully explained that the Congo was where they wanted to house the project, but it was stationed in Washington Township. I felt like that was just very kind of mixed. I didn't Maybe I needed to spell it out for me, and I'm just dumb, but I just was like, what is the point in the Congo? I just remember Terry Colby always talking about it. But anyways, I personally do believe that White Rose's machine worked in some sort of parallel universe, given that all these people were killing themselves for her. I know I've listened to countless amounts of podcasts that say they don't believe it worked, but my counter to that is, then how did Angela see, her young self? I understand she didn't recognize her young self, but she was straight up interviewed by her young self, so there has to be some sort of, assuming everything we saw in that time was real, she was interviewed by her young self, so there's some sort of time machine to bring them back and forth on some level. My guess is Sam Esmail might have wrote himself in a way that the machine was actually shown, and maybe it didn't work. Maybe he wrote it and it didn't work. Maybe he didn't write it at all. I'm not sure. But overall, for the sake of the story, it really doesn't matter if it worked. I mean, for the sake of us wanting answers, we want to know why there's the photos on the faces of Angela's family and friends in her apartment are covered. Why is Angela acting crazy? There's a lot of results happening due to whatever White Rose is planning. The thing is, we don't know exactly what she was planning, and even after the fact, we still don't really know what she's planning. And I'm not really sure if that was like a MacGuffin or if it was just like, it was one of the things, stay tuned for next week and you'll see what happens. And it kind of felt like it started to turn into that just a little bit, but I'm not 100% upset that we, didn't get to see the explanation of what Angela was shown or what White Rose had planned. I do find it a little bit specific that they had to kill themselves to get there. I kind of wanted maybe a little bit more explanation on that. But I don't know. Just I didn't need it spelled out that this is what the Hadron Collider did. I would have just rather had just a tad bit more confirmation. Also, we're still on Johnny's comment. There's no explanation to what Elliot did when Vera came upstairs. We just bypassed that shit and pretend it didn't happen. I wondered if everyone's talking about when Vera first showed up. I want to say that when Vera first showed up was at the end of season 3 when, I think it's Darlene and there's like a prostitute or somebody that she's walking with, or a friend down the street. And so that's what I thought when he showed up. Those were the missing days or hours that I wasn't exactly sure of. But other than that, I know what you mean. And I get what Sam Esmail was trying to do from the jump when he did all that meta shit when he killed off his main protagonist. He should have just finished the job. I already had the gut instinct that there were several outcomes. That this was not going to end well for Elliot. Everything went too fast in such a compressed short span of 1 year, 2005. I would have rather Mr. Robot die a hero in the nuclear blast than for him to live long enough to see him come back to being Pee Wee Herman. So, Johnny, I'm not really sure exactly if he became Pee Wee Herman, coming back and reassimilating himself. I think that it really depends on your expectations of what you wanted out of the finale. I mean, there were a lot of balls up in the air. It's like, you got the Tyrell, you got the White Rose, you got the Elliot, you got the family, you got the 3 days missing, you got the hack, you got E Corp, you got the Deus group. A lot of stuff, all having to cover up in the last 3 or 4 episodes, and it's quite a feat to do. So I will say the fact that this, I guess, entire series is compressed into a year definitely grounds this television show in the middle of the 2010 era, between 2010 and 2020. So it definitely grounds it in between there. And there's something, I don't know, about ending Mr. Robot at the end of the decade, getting ready to start 2020, and kind of pulling out of, his eye of, Elliot's eye, and kind of reassimilating ourselves and kind of having a new vision. Definitely feels representative of, I guess, us, as watchers, us as creators, whoever's creating digital media, that, kind of pulling out of Elliot's eye and, seeing Darlene is, seeing the light kind of. It's kind of like, closing the book, changing, going to the next chapter, going to the next step. It feels like moving on in a way that is extremely represented on the screen, that I actually like. Spectoral says, can you help me answer a couple of lingering questions I have for the end of the show? I'm wondering, when did real Elliot wake up for Darlene once before? I'm thinking real Elliot might have woken up once before, at least when he was leaving the jail cell, and we can't hear exactly what he says to Darlene. He whispers something to her. Also, I'm wondering, was it real Elliot who told Darlene Vera was out? I guess it was. I mean, I don't really see if it's important or not. It could have been Mr. Robot. I'm not really sure if that, because of the way it ends, it doesn't really matter all that much if you think about it. But I do think it was Mr. Robot. Did we ever get an explanation for the missing 3 days of memory in season 2 with Tyrell? So that was something a lot of people were expecting to have, a big reveal on. I personally do not think that they put enough importance on the 3 days in the last 2 seasons for it to be kind of like this big mystery item. It's not like, oh, what the hell was he doing for those 3 days? It seemed like it was just, he happened to be out for 3 days and, lost track of time. I mean, in the first season, I felt like he had lost, a couple days and a couple weeks at a time. And so I wasn't really upset that we missed those 3 days. It would have been nice to go back and see what he was doing, but it didn't really seem like they were doing much except for planning for the hack, which, in accordance to what we're talking about when Tyrell and Elliot are doing the major hack at the end of season 1. I believe we see what happens at the end of season 2, and then we get the reveal in season 3 that Irving came to that house to pick up Tyrell, and then Mr. Robot and Elliot went and, I don't know, parked Tyrell's car wherever, somewhere in New York, and that's where he woke up in season 1. So, in Tyrell's car. So yeah, I sometimes think about that going back, and I'm like, what, it would have been nice to see, but necessarily, I don't know what really happened. It really just seemed like he was, sleeping in the car for 3 days. I'm not exactly sure if that would have made sense, because That would have been an expensive ass bill, but let's see. Who, Elliot or Mastermind, told Tyrell in the theme park, "You're only seeing what's in front of you and not what's above you"? That is a fascinating question. Um, let's see. I guess my personal opinion about that would be that it's still Mastermind, but we have some Elliot seeping into it because he might be talking about himself. I felt like a lot of the times they were referring to God within this season, or sorry, within this series. He might be talking about the real Elliot, which I'm not exactly sure. This might be good to go back and rewatch season 2. I think that a lot of people are going back and doing rewatches and recaps and everything, watching the full series. I obviously don't have time at this point, but um, I do think that season 2 is one of the seasons that felt the most murky in a way. And the way, when I mean kind of murky, it felt like we're in this dream state and nothing exactly feels solid, and it's hard to care about the the protagonist if we can't tell if he's being captured by doctors or if he's being captured by FBI guys, and if he's, we can't trust exactly what we're seeing for a lot of the season 2, and a lot of it is because Mastermind Elliot is probably trying to control. Um, and a lot of season 2 is talking about, living in illusion and trying to accept real control, and that makes a lot of sense. And especially because when I was going back on rewatching that, it was like, this is really deep, really, you know metaphorical, I guess, trying to take real control. And most people thought it was taking control from Mr. Robot. It was Mastermind Elliot taking control from Elliot. So overall, yes, I do think that Mastermind Elliot was the one that was saying you're only seeing what's above you, not what's in front of you. Because to my knowledge, we do not hear real Elliot speak until we enter the red zone, and like episode season 4:10. Thank you, Spectral. Um, Let me see. Okay. Ivzy Cool 10. Alright, so Ivzy Cool 10 says, "I'm hoping that the ending signified a merging of the all personalities into one. So Elliot is now just Elliot in all of them." That's what I'm hoping too. If Easy Cool 10. Um, I really think that the whole entire season is showing the fracturing of all his personalities and how they're all interacting with each other. The fact that they don't all know about each other, or Mastermind Elliot doesn't know about all of them until the very end. Now that he knows all about them, now he can reassimilate himself. Excuse me. Jamie Boris. Our Elliot was looking at the trophies in what would have been the real Elliot's room, and a glimpse into what would have been the real Elliot's personality and life. Had he not been traumatized by his father, the images of our Elliot on the real Elliot's computer would have emerged awkwardly. His graphics art, as we saw, but instead took over the real Elliot inwardly. That's why our Elliot mentions in the movie scene about him always being a part of him, parts of his mind. I imagine that if the finale went further, we would have the real Elliot not remembering anything about his life as a computer whiz. In the real world, he would end up creating a character, perhaps a comic book called Mr. Robot, about a hacker vigilante. That was by Jamie Boris. Thank you. So yeah, the majority of that I agree. I think that that alternate life, that the Alderson loop that the red zone Elliot, I guess the real Elliot is stuck in, is in the fantasy. It's a harsh reality that it was a reality that he wanted. It was a fantasy he wanted. So he put the real Elliot there, while the mastermind Elliot took over. Now, one issue I have, Jamie, is if we continue Mr. Robot after, let's just say there's like 2 more episodes. Hypothetically, there were two episodes after this. Elliot, real Elliot, if real Elliot is waking up at the end of this show or story and doesn't remember shit that he did, I mean, how fucked would you be? I mean, he is somewhat single-handedly responsible for some of the biggest world's hacks, and like, I didn't see if he had handcuffs or if he had security detail on him, but I'm pretty sure they would be able to, reverse a lot of what he's done. And I'm just saying, like, he would probably have to plead for insanity or something like that to stay out of jail. It's just not plausible, in my opinion, that Elliot Alderson as a character, if you continue this story, is going to have a happy ending after this. I mean, the reason you have to, Sam Esmail had to cut it off right there because he would have had an assload of work just explaining, if you wanted some sort of happy ending for him to, go off into the sunset with some, Darlene or whatever. I mean, there is a lot of work that has to be done. So I personally am glad where it ended, because I think that Elliot Alderson as a character is not looking so hot past laying in that hospital bed. I really don't think that Elliot is probably a free man, at least immediately. Everyone can speculate about what would happen after, or we can have one of those El Caminos. You know what? Why not just have Sam Esmail and all of the Mr. Robot gang come back for a final movie, and I would be happy. I think that this is a show that could especially work for having the El Camino treatment. It's a way that we can relive sometimes with some of the best characters, but also we can get some explanations to some that we didn't get. Emily Rapology. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. Emily is Angela's mom. I love this show and I love your reviews. Thank you. Oh, I appreciate it, Emily. I apologize. I got your last name wrong. Rapology. Is it Italian or something? I don't know. There's a lot of countries out there, so I'm just kind of winging it at this point. But thank you for your comment. And yes, I did get Emily is Angela's mother. I originally watched it, and I think it was the real Elliot calling her mother, and that's why he answers it and says Emily, and that's what had got me confused. He had answered it, and he was asking for Emily. But thank you. Let me see. Catalina Elias, or Liars. It's not liars, it's layers, I think. I'm sorry if I said that. After watching the finale, I can see the link to the scene from season 2-4. It was a flashback scene taking place on Halloween 2014. Darlene went to visit Elliot, and he knew who she was. He tells her he was fired from his IT job on Wall Street, and now he has been court-ordered therapy. This may be the only time we get to see the real primary, quote-unquote, real primary Elliot during this whole series. Darlene brought a F Society mask to him. She got from a Halloween shop and asked Elliot to put it on. During this scene, I think we see the emergence of the mastermind, Hoodie Elliot. He begins to plot the 5'9" hack in front of our eyes. That is a great catch, Catalina. Wow. So, if that's true, because that does make sense. I forget that sometime between 2014, when Darlene came back, and sometime in season 1, when Elliot tries to kiss Darlene, he forgets completely who she is. And so it is interesting to kind of track this, that might be the first time we see real Elliot. I'm not exactly sure if that makes 100% sense. I got to think about it for a minute because that's a great piece of information. Thank you, Catalina. I'll give you a little like right there. Irene Heralabatos. I'm sorry if I'm getting all these last names wrong. I'm not great with last names. Y'all can fuck my last name up for me. I definitely would have liked to see the two Elliots interact more. It was fascinating. She also says, I think that fighting the 1% of the 1% was an important part of getting us involved and invested in the show, an important part of understanding Elliot. It made the show fit in its time. The human part of understanding Elliot and his way of dealing with trauma and his connection to his sister was more universal. Overall, the show was incredible, and I need to rewatch from season 1. Also, she says it was awful to watch Elliot kill himself. Our Elliot was called the Mastermind, by the way. This episode started out intrinsically, and then became horrifically. And then became horrific and ended beautifully. I had tears. I completely agree, Irene. I think that fighting the 1% of the 1% is a lot easier to get us invested than I need to fight myself in a DID, dual personality disorder. I personally, one of the main reasons that I jumped on the show is because of, this guy. I was like, he's like a super whiz. He's like a super vigilante hacker, but he also has these real life problems, and he's extremely relatable. I think that Sam Esmail did a stellar job creating one of the most interesting and relatable characters of the last 10 years. Just through the direction, through the story, through the music and the cinematography. It's all fitting within tone, and kind of going on this journey and this ride with Elliot has just been fascinating, and I absolutely have loved it. Let me see. You said at one point that Jared Huto. You said at one point that our Elliot, when talking with his clone, was the clone. You said at one point that our Elliot, when talking with his clone, that the clone was the real Elliot. My perception was when he woke up, the television showed White Rose dead and Darlene, and what we had seen the entire season of our Elliot in control of, was our Elliot in control of the real Elliot? Was Darlene real? We saw the transformation, I believe, in one season on Halloween, when Darlene and Elliot watch the horror movie and he puts on his father's jacket and the mask, comes up with the idea of F Society. But anyway, Elliot was asked by Darlene where the real Elliot was, and our Elliot said he was in a safe place. I don't know. I'm still confused. Okay, so yes, I already responded to this, but I had said my understanding is everything we saw through each season happened. All the people that died stayed dead. The red universe was the Alderson infinite loop where our Elliot put the real Elliot. Our Elliot tries to kill the real Elliot, which he does temporarily. I think basically what the show needed to do was show that the real Elliot could not be killed. I think that it kind of got a little bit up its ass a little bit by showing, trying to have this marriage happen and Mr. Robot explain it. I felt like they needed to have the real Elliot come back to say, you can't kill me, I basically wanted them to show how the loop would restart regardless if he tried to kill Elliot or not. Let me see what else we have. Politically correct speech isn't my fucking thing, says. Is Tyrell the real Elliot? That's what it comes across. Um, for many reasons, no. First one, I think that the characters have clearly been in separate places at separate times. I know that we had danced and we had fancied a couple of these theories that I think his name was Crayon Divinity, had a really great, with a K, he had a great video that was kind of theorizing if Elliot and Tyrell were the same person. And there was a lot of compelling evidence that they were, but overall, I don't think that there is solidified evidence that they would be, and especially because, I mean, they're clearly, they are clearly in two separate places at once. Or, they can't be in the same place at once, so I don't think they can be the same person. Plus, I don't think it was confirmed that, well, let me think. I don't know. No, I'm just gonna say no. I don't believe so. Black Ham said, let me see. I thought it would be an action-packed two-parter, with first part being a setup and the second part resolving all the storylines that were hinted. I'm kind of disappointed it turned out to be another therapy episode. It's a bit annoying knowing our Elliot was never real. The whole quote-unquote what is and isn't real was good with Elliot's dad, but after it got kind of annoying because I never know if the characters are actually in danger. And if they are, the writers could just say it wasn't real to negate any consequences of what happened. The whole persona thing should have just ended after we found out Mr. Robot wasn't real. It's mostly why I despise season 2. Okay, so, and he has, Black Ham does have one or two likes on that, so he's not alone. I'm not going to begrudge the people that wanted a more action-packed season finale. I completely understand that. I was a little bit more geared to have a tempered season finale, mostly because I don't think that the season finales of the seasons are the strongest parts of Mr. Robot. I think they give a nice capper. I think it's a nice cherry on top. I think it's, extremely well done. But in comparison to some of the amazing episodes that happen through the seasons, such as the Vera episode of that revelation, I thought that episode alone could have just dropped the mic right there. I know it wouldn't have been nearly as satisfying, but I would, if they would have ended it right there, I would have been like, holy fuck, like you left us hanging on, dropping the big bomb on us. And so having this kind of second reveal of him being this other personality, like I said earlier, it was not the biggest reveal for me. I thought it was like, whoa, man, now everything makes sense. It wasn't like, holy shit, it's not like blew my hair off and my eyebrows away. It was more like, like I'm now everything is starting to click into place. Now everything makes more sense. So, Black Ham, I understand what you're feeling, and I'm sorry it wasn't more of a action jam-packed for you, and it was way more metaphorical and metaphysical than I was, and surreal than I was expecting. Him walking around the red universe in his mind or whatever. But yeah, it's one of those endings I think that is going to play differently as you come away from the show. It's about 2 weeks out from the finale now, and so I kind of did want to go spend some holiday time and then come back and record this, just mostly because I wasn't sure how I was going to sit with it. And the longer I do sit with it, the longer I do enjoy the ending, but I am recognizing the flaws that it has. I can't say that it's perfect, mostly because there were gripes I had with it, and it's not major gripes, and it's not gripes that are going to ruin the show or the legacy of it. Like, I'd still highly recommend this to just about anybody. You're going to get hooked on some level, but I can't ignore some of the small tidbits and clues that Sam Esmail was leaving out for us to get, such as, what is 1116? Like, I felt like 11:16 was such a motif through all of the clocks and the ticking of the time in the background, and White Rose having such a meticulous uh, planning for every second of her life. It just felt like I had said this in previous podcasts that sometimes Sam Esmail will linger on something that makes it feel like it's way more important than it really is. A lot of the times I'm thinking of specifically there's pictures and artwork that are just kind of lingered on in the seasons, and I don't think we've gotten any explanation to any of those. To my knowledge, there was these posters in the back rooms of where White Rose interviewed Elliot, and then when White Rose interviewed Elliot and Angela, Angela had the hang in there poster with the cat in the background, and then Elliot had another one, something almost the same, kind of like a hang in there, and those didn't really come to anything. Like, there was no reason to have them there. The faces covered with stickers or whatever on the photos. We assumed it was so that those people would come back in the Red Universe, but that ultimately came to be nothing. So I'm not going to sit here and say this is a perfect series by any means, but it executes what it really does well on some of the highest levels. Linda H. says, sorry, my Bluetooth connected real quick. Linda H. says, personalities are formed to compartmentalize because knowledge of all the information at once would be too much. The mother developed the part of Elliot that blamed himself for the abuse and hated himself for being weak. Some personalities are not helpful except for their ability to bear burden of certain incapacitating emotions or events. If I'm truly getting the psychology on this wrong, someone truly, I don't know, give me a heads up. Let me see. I wrote down what the different personalities were on from Krista. Let me see. Okay, so Robot, the first personality, was created when he jumped out of the window. He is the protector to replace his father and protect Elliot from intolerable situations. The mother personality is the persecutor, blaming Elliot for the abuse and I guess self-hate. Elliot's young self, to handle the abuse. Elliot's young self was created to handle the abuse he couldn't tolerate, which definitely sounds way too close in proximity to the Robot character. Like, I'm not really sure if Sam Esmail gave enough explanation to what the difference is of Robot and Elliot, just from that line. And then the last personality is the rage personality, Elliot. Elliot's the final personality that Krista is unable to crack because she has no idea that she was talking to one of the personalities. So, yeah, I appreciate it, Linda. That was one thing that when I originally covered the podcast, I was like, what are the different personalities again? What do they represent? And going back and rewatching it and, writing down everything, they definitely have a very thin line they walk, especially. It's like Mr. Robot's there to handle to handle when Elliot can't take the punches, or Mastermind Elliot can't take the punches, but young Elliot's also there for intolerable situations. So it's like, what is the difference between the two? I'm not really sure why they would divide that. Let me know in the comments if y'all have a big distinguishing measure between young Elliot and Robot, especially because Robot is supposed to be designed as a protector, and like I said in the feedback or in the original finale, this motherfucker has tried to fuck Elliot, Mastermind Elliot up a lot. Like, he's trying to, his first season he throws him off the boardwalk. Second season he's metaphorically shooting him, but I mean, I guess I got to think about it because is Mr. Robot trying to get rid of Mastermind Elliot and trying to bring real Elliot back, or what? Because the more you think about it, it's like, what exactly are they fighting control for? And is Mr. Robot actually fighting for the control of the mastermind, or is he fighting control of real Elliot? I guess that's the real question, or if that's the same thing. Megan Walter says, read up on DID. Every alter makes perfect sense in that regard. This is a real disorder that people can have. Sam didn't have to make up anything regarding the aspects because he knew about DID and what it entails. Yes, from what I hear, DID is, a real disorder, and I don't remember which podcast. It might have been Bald Move. It might have been post-show recaps, but one of them had feedback. Somebody write in, and they said that one of the watchers of Mr. Robot, their mother used to have DID, and they would get calls from their mother from the different personalities. And one, I thought that's horrifying and fascinating at the same time. Like, I don't know what I would do if I had my mother just changing personalities on me. That just sounds so left field from anything I could relate to. But I was just like, okay, so this this writer, the person that writing in was saying they would get calls from their mother from the different personalities, and when it was certain personalities, they wouldn't want to talk. They wouldn't want to talk to their mother. And so I completely agree, Megan. Like, it's a real disease. It's a real disorder, I guess. And it absolutely it sounds like it's very difficult to deal with. Let me see. So I want to be fair to the people that didn't like it. I know there's a couple. Myroslav Nikotic says, such a wasted opportunity, too many plot holes, setups didn't pay off, characters that didn't have any point. White Rose, Angela was laughable, disappointing ending for such a great show. Well, Myroff, I'm sorry about that. And I asked him if he had any theories crafted for the finale, just to see if he wanted something to happen. And he said, why? No need for that. Only question was, is it a dream? Is it some sort of opioid trance? But it was all in his head, and that was the only option. Can you guess why? I can't believe nobody even thinks about that. Well, like I said, Miroff, in my podcast leading up to the finale, I kind of had myself braced for this kind of finale. I was actually hoping we would get some more explanations to the White Rose and Dark Army and Angela stuff, but I was braced for not having it as well. And we ended up getting a definitive answer on one side, whether the machine worked or not, but we also got a lot of questions on it as well, because everyone in the show is saying it's not real. The thing that's saying it, for me, that it is real is the fact that we saw young Angela. Now, if that's not enough for you as the listener to say that, oh yeah, then the machine definitely worked, well, I want to see what convinced. I guess this would go along with the dropped plot lines, would be the reasoning of why you have to kill yourself to get to this other place. Why can't you just die of natural causes or something? Victor keeps it 100. For a couple different reasons, I cried at the end of the show. Not a perfect show, but fucking brilliant despite any flaws. It's definitely in my top 5 favorite shows. Victor keeps it 100. I am right there with you. I feel 100% about that. It clearly has flaws, but it's still one of my favorite television shows of all time. Let me go through a couple of notes that I took real quick before we hop off of the podcast. There's a couple of these things that I might have covered in the previous finale, but just to kind of round up some stuff. Like I said, cinematography, direction, music, characters, story, relatable, all the above. All of them are phenomenal. Those are some of the best things that you could say about this amazing series. Mr. Robot is actually the reason I got into podcasting. I've said it several times, but this was the theory crafting show that, I was like, damn, maybe I need a little bit of supplemental information. Some, maybe a 20-minute podcast here or a 50-minute podcast there to kind of enlighten me on what the hell I just watched. Maybe kind of get some cool comments and reviews and see what other people in the world are thinking about Mr. Robot. And so that's why I got into podcasting, or that's why I got into listening to podcasts. From there, I decided to produce podcasts. So, yeah, let me talk about a couple of the notes that I took within the final 2 episodes, and we'll start wrapping it up there. The music. Don't worry, got no Mr. Robot. Yeah, so, it was inevitable that we would get Mr. Roboto, and if you listen to the lyrics of it, he's like, I got a secret. I'm just a man who needed somewhere to hide. And there's a reason I'm a podcaster, not a singer. But yeah, so anyways, listen to the lyrics of Mr. Roboto. It definitely sounds like it's representing all of what the show is referring to. Girl on Scooter is the same girl from season 1. And this is in the Red Universe. Apparently she isn't supposed to be Darlene in this Red Universe. But it doesn't make sense because at the end of season 1, he states that Darlene used to run around on singing Frere Jacques on the scooter. So I don't understand why that's not referred to as Darlene at this point. And I haven't heard any explanations on any podcast of it either. But I was surprised. I was like, good Lord, that girl grew up. 11:16, opposite of 5'9", is, that's what a lot of people were talking about, or of some sort, because 11:16 was everywhere in the Red Universe. His mother's clock was always set to 11:16 in the real world as well when they went to go visit, and Elliot notes it as well. So I'm kind of curious about that. I wonder if they even went to go see his mother. And what makes me wonder is anytime we're seeing 11:16, are we in the Red Universe? Because that's something I actually wanted to maybe go back and check if we did a rewatch. If anyone's doing that, go back and check and see if that's confirmed. I don't know if that is confirmed or not. Did Darlene know about his abuse? My guess, and a lot of people's guesses, is probably not, because Darlene was really pissed about the way her mother treated her father. And if she knew what her father was doing to Elliot, I really doubt that she would would be on that side. I've thought about alternate universes in which, I was super successful, very much in the same sense that Elliot has created a loop for, real Mastermind Elliot has created a loop for real Elliot. And it's something to be reflective of in some ways. I have my folks are divorced, and that's something I've thought about a lot. What if they had stayed together? What if, they hadn't moved, I hadn't moved, I didn't make new friends, I stayed in, a single place, maybe became more successful in that place. And I've thought about that alternative timeline for myself personally. And so seeing it kind of realized on screen again, for the second time on the show. Well, it's not the second time on the show, but rewatching the show, I really did have that connection of, wow, I've had this fantasy before of having, what if my life was quote unquote perfect? And it obviously doesn't show like the downsides of it, but it's something I have given thought about too, being, the number one in my class, being best on all the sports teams, that I'm not, I'm not at either. And so it's kind of reflective in that way. Philip's lines are like, but when he first sees Philip in Red Universe, he says, I'm evil incarnate. I'm just joshing you. He says things that I don't think Philip would ever say in the real world. So that was another clue that we're probably in the Red Zone universe. Was his mother always mean? a lot of anger taken out on Elliot in the flashbacks, but she seems to be nice in the Red universe. So ultimately, I think we land on that she was somewhat abusive and mean in the real timeline, mostly because that's what Darlene acknowledges. Elliot probably slipped into a state at the end of season 1 with into the Red universe with the photo without Darlene shown in the Times Square on, and it's also so at the end of season 1 when him and Mr. Robot are kind of dishing it out. There's like this big scene in the middle of Times Square, and Elliot is like yelling at his family that's on screen, I think, on Times Square, and it's the same photo of everyone without Darlene, and it's the same photo that is shown on Mr. Robot's, his father's phone in the Red universe. And so my guess is, I wonder if that is Elliot kind of, I guess, slipping into the Red universe. Let me see. Tyrell for the last time. I think the only reason I could think of the relevance of Tyrell, especially fading off into the blue light, is definitely the fact that I think he was not living his real life. I don't think that he was really Tyrell. I think that he was I think so. I think this Tyrell we were watching the entire season was a different Tyrell from what we, would originally have known. Now we don't know Tyrell's secret or trauma or whatever, but we know he was kind of fucked up before. So, especially with the relationship he was having, and he was kind of like a train wreck waiting to happen. Let me see. I love the final wipe down they do. It's kind of a motif. Oh, we got to do a wipe down. Everything gets microwaved. Everything gets blown up. Everything gets thrown out of the trash. He does a wipe down in the final episode. Oh, he has to wipe himself down because he just killed himself. Let me see. Oranges in the back of the truck. A signal of death, if anyone knows. When Elliot is trying to put him, when he's trying to pack himself up in the box and take him out into the car, there's a truck that pulls up and it's a big orange truck. And so anybody knows motifs in movies as oranges are a signal of death. Dom, when she gets the ID from Elliot, says this person is nothing like you. She doesn't say this person doesn't look like you. She said is nothing like you. And I think that's, very specific to the point where I think that this means our Elliot, that our mastermind Elliot, really does look like real Elliot. Let me see. The ticking of the clock seems to be relevant throughout the entire series, mostly revolving around White Rose, but it somehow comes back when he's trying to pack up himself into the back of Tyrell's truck with the box leaking blood, and the ticking watch is in the background. It's like, and I was like, oh shit, it's coming back, but I really do feel like that was kind of a motif that was dropped in a way. Like, what is the point in the clocks and all of that? Like, there was so much imagery revolving time, mostly revolving around White Rose, that I didn't understand why this had the ticking motif behind, and we didn't really have anything reflecting White Rose. Maybe I was off and it's not reflecting White Rose, it's just reflecting everything, but I felt like there was always a ticking time watch majority of the time behind White Rose's scenes, or scenes that we wanted to catch that were relevant. Creating, let me see. Oh wait, sorry, these are the personalities I wrote down. Okay, so the very last scene with Elliot hopping into the very last scene with them pulling out of the city and all of the personalities standing in the room and kind of explaining they'll always be a part of him. It's emotional, and I love how close it gets to the character of Elliot, but he doesn't say anything. He just kind of focuses in on the camera. And from there, he walks into the Cineplex and watches what I believe is Elliot's life. And what most people are saying is those are scenes from the entire series, not just season 4. I tried to go back and watch some. I can't see any scenes that I know for sure that are them. But yeah, it was kind of an Interstellar-esque ending, if you know what I mean. Just with the it's not really an ending of Interstellar, but there's a scene where Matthew McConaughey's looking at a screen of some people he loves and he's upset, and this was very it evoked that feeling very much. But yeah, Mr. Robot, wow, what a fucking awesome show. I can't say enough good things about it. I would have liked maybe one or two more things tied up here and there in a nice little bow, but I can't complain really about the entire series because I think that it's such a cinematic achievement. It's the one show that I can point to that says, look what you can do on television. Look, you don't need to have something on the big screen to make it feel like it's, a movie. And I felt like every time I was watching Mr. Robot, every week, it was like watching a brand new movie. Fascinating work from all sides of the spectrum, front of the camera to the back of the camera. Rami Malek, Carly Shaken, Angela Doubleday, Christian Slater, the director, the Todd Campbell. We have SamEsmail, Todd Campbell as cinematographer. We have Matt Quayle on the ones and twos. We have amazing music. I can't say enough good things about it. It's just an amazing television show, and it's sad that it's over. That's one thing. I do feel like, what do we got to look forward to now? I think about that every once in a while, just not having any more Mr. Robots. Like, what the hell do we got to look forward to? So I've come to the decision that I'm definitely going to watch anything else that, these individuals are going to be involved in. SamEsmail's style is just phenomenal. We already covered Homecoming, which is a series on Amazon Prime that is directed by him. And you can check that out on the LuckyDog podcast reviews as well. It's probably on SoundCloud, I believe. But yeah, he is a phenomenal creator. I think occasionally there's a tad. It's not 100% style over substance. He just has some really mad, interesting, badass style, and I really like it. And so I'm ready to follow wherever they go. Watch some brand new television shows, some brand new mystery shows, some stuff that reflect our own reality and our own culture and the times that we live in. I will say, if you have a show you're looking for to kind of fill the void of Mr. Robot, a lot of people I hear are referring everyone from Mr. Robot to The Leftovers. The Leftovers is up there with my top 10 favorite television shows of all time, not decade, of all time. Up there with Mr. Robot. The Leftovers was life-changing, just as Mr. Robot has been. And when I say life-changing, I mean I'm literally changing the craft I make my my videos and my photos, and the way I make my digital media is changed because I've watched this media. And so, check out The Leftovers, mainly specifically for the story. I won't say that it has that same aesthetic that Mr. Robot has, but it does have that mystery. It does have that sense of surrealness in a way. And there's tons of podcasts that you can listen to, Bald Move, post-show recaps, a bunch of stuff like that. But also come back to us. You always got to stick with the LuckyDog. But there's a lot of accompanied companion listening pieces that help you understand what's going on in The Leftovers. And I will say the first 4 episodes of season 1 of The Leftovers are the slowest, but once you get past 5 to the end of the series, there's only three seasons, and each 10 episodes each. And once you get past episode 5 of season 1, I'd say every episode after that is a mic drop. I mean, it is fucking like you were not ready. and it only gets better with each episode. So season 2 of Leftovers has been called some of the best television on television, period. Has fucking Regina King in it, so that should tell you alone. You know, Justin Theroux, you won't know who he is if you haven't watched it yet, but if you know anything about Carrie Coon, oh buddy, oh my goodness, I am just pumped for all y'all. Anybody that has not listened to it or watched it that is going to, I'm just curious if, what y'all are thinking, because I'm shaking in my boots right now, thinking I'm like excited for y'all to watch it. It almost makes me want to go back and rewatch it. It is phenomenal television, and yeah, be sure to check it out. Thank you for listening to the LuckyDog Podcast. PayPal.me/LuckyDog Podcast for all donations. It is not cheap to run a podcast, you know, keeping people on, running streams, going to movies, paying for bullshit. It ain't free. It ain't cheap. And so all your support absolutely helps keep the lights on here. PayPal.me/LuckyDog Podcast. Check out comments, questions, concerns. Email the LuckyDogPodcast@gmail.com. Twitter, LuckyDog Podcast. Facebook, Twitch, Instagram, YouTube. Links are all down below in the description. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching, listening, whatever you're doing with the LuckyDog Podcast. Thank you. Oh yeah, be sure to use your Amazon Echo to download TuneIn, and you can listen to all the brand new LuckyDog podcasts at your leisure. Thank you, and take it easy. Goodbye, friend.